What if you could tell someone was lying without them saying a word? Forget that. What if you could get them to tell you the truth, freely and willingly, even when their life depended on keeping it secret? Most people think interrogation is about staring contests and slammed doors. Hollywood nonsense. The truth is quieter, more surgical. It's a science of the mind. Today, I'm not just going to show you the tricks of the trade. I'm going to show you the psychological machinery behind them. These are the techniques the FBI uses. The ones that don't make it into the movies because they're too subtle, too effective, and frankly, a little too dangerous in the wrong hands. So lean in close. School is in session. Have you ever been told a lie so audacious, so convincing, that you started to doubt your own memory, your own sanity? It's a deeply unsettling feeling. A government study found that in a typical 10-minute conversation, the average person will lie to 3 times. Now, imagine the stakes are higher than a simple white lie. Imagine a lifetime in prison is on the line. The frequency doesn't just go up, the quality of the lie becomes an art form. Most amateurs think the way to break a liar is to hit them with the truth head-on. We know you did it. We have the evidence. That's a rookie mistake. It gives them a target. It allows them to adapt their story, to build their fortress of lies stronger around the facts you've just handed them. The real professional, the true artist of interrogation, knows that evidence isn't a battering ram. It's a scalpel, and it's all about when you make the cut. This is the core of a technique we call the strategic use of evidence, or SUE. It's a patient man's game. It's about letting the suspect talk, letting them build their narrative, their alibi, their beautiful, intricate house of cards. You let them lay every single card on the table, with confidence, until they feel safe. You ask them questions you already know the answers to. You let them commit. I remember a fraud case from years back. A financial manager, we'll call him Mr. Sterling. Slick character. He'd allegedly embezzled millions through a web of offshore accounts. His alibi for the key transaction date was ironclad. He claimed, at a tech conference in another state. He had flight records, hotel receipts, even a program with his handwritten notes in the margins. He walked into the interrogation room with the serene confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. For 2 hours, my partner and I let him talk. We asked about the speakers at the conference, the food, the people he met. He gave us a masterful performance, filled with rich, credible detail. He was enjoying it. The psychological principle at play here is cognitive load. Maintaining a lie is mentally exhausting. You're simultaneously inventing a false narrative, remembering the details of that narrative, suppressing the truth, and monitoring the listener for signs of disbelief. It's a 4-ring circus happening inside your skull. A truthful person is just recalling a memory. It's effortless. A liar is performing brain surgery on themselves. By letting Sterling talk, we weren't just listening, we were forcing him to expend enormous mental energy to keep his story straight. He was so focused on the details of the conference lie, he wasn't thinking about anything else. After he had spun his web completely, after he was leaned back in his chair, practically yawning, I slid a small piece of paper across the table. It was a credit card receipt, a charge for 2 hot dogs and a soda from a street vendor. The vendor was located 3 blocks from his office. On the same day, and at the same time, he was supposedly 3,000 miles away, listening to a keynote speaker. The receipt was time-stamped. We'd found it during a routine sweep of his trash. It was the one tiny detail he'd forgotten, the one loose thread. His face didn't drop. It crumpled. It was the look of a computer crashing. His brain, already overloaded from maintaining the lie, couldn't process this new, contradictory piece of data. He couldn't invent a new story on the fly that incorporated both the conference and the hot dogs. The house of cards came down. He confessed everything within 10 minutes. This isn't just for the interrogation room. Think about a time in your own life. Maybe you suspect a partner is being unfaithful or a child is hiding something. Your instinct is to confront them with your evidence immediately. I saw this text message. Don't. That's a mistake. Instead, ask them about their day. Let them build their story. Let them commit to a narrative. How was your evening? Who were you with? Oh, that's nice. Let them dig the hole. Then when they are finished, calmly introduce the contradictory fact. That's interesting. because your phone records show you were somewhere else entirely. You will learn more from their reaction to that one moment, the panic, the fumbling for a new explanation than you ever would from a shouting match. It's not about what you know. It's about the devastating, surgical precision of when you reveal it. Have you ever held back a piece of information, waiting for just the right moment to use it? Think about a time you caught someone in a lie. Was it the direct accusation or the unexpected evidence that truly unraveled them? When you picture an interrogation, you probably imagine a small, dark room, a single light bulb, and a detective leaning in, voice dripping with menace. "We know you did it. Just confess and make it easy on yourself." This is the good cop, bad cop routine, the confrontational approach that dominates television. And sometimes, with a certain kind of low-level, unsophisticated subject, it works. But with an intelligent, disciplined, or hardened individual, it's like trying to open a bank vault with a crowbar. All you do is trigger their defenses. The walls go up, the lawyer is called, and the conversation is over. The true master of interrogation knows that a whisper can be more powerful than a shout. This brings us to one of the most elegant and deceptively simple methods ever devised, the Scharf technique. It was developed from the experiences of a German interrogator, Hans Scharf, who had incredible success questioning captured Allied pilots during World War II. His secret? He never acted like an interrogator. He acted like a friend. He'd bring them good food, take them for walks in the woods, and talk about everything except what he wanted to know. He would present himself as knowing almost everything already, but being a bit fuzzy on a few minor, insignificant details. He'd say something like, "We already know your squadron is switching to the new P-51 Mustangs, a fine aircraft, but the paperwork is always a mess. Did they deliver them with the new long-range fuel tanks, or are you still using the old ones?" It's a minor point, just for my records. The pilot, wanting to appear knowledgeable and perhaps a little boastful, would often correct him. "Oh no, we got the new tanks weeks ago. They give us an extra hour of flight time." And just like that, Scharf had a critical piece of intelligence, not through threats or intimidation, but by making the prisoner feel like a helpful expert correcting a small, friendly error. The psychological genius of this is that it bypasses the very mechanism of resistance. It doesn't feel like an interrogation because there's no confrontation. It leverages fundamental aspects of human nature, the desire to show off knowledge, the urge to correct others, and the need to feel important. You're not a suspect, you're a consultant. I used a version of this years ago on a kid we can call Danny. He was a small-time lookout caught in the orbit of a nasty local gang. He was terrified of the gang if he talked, and of us if he didn't. Pressuring him would have just made him shut down completely. So I took him to a diner. I bought him a burger and a milkshake. We talked about cars for 20 minutes. Turns out we both liked classic muscle. Then I casually mentioned the gang leader. "Yeah, I hear Vinny is getting a bit sloppy," I said, shaking my head. "We already know about the warehouse down by the docks where they keep the merchandise. Honestly, I'm surprised he's still using such an obvious spot." Now, I didn't know for sure. It was an educated guess based on a sliver of intel. Danny took the bait. He scoffed, a little puff of teenage arrogance. "Nah, man, not since the bust last year. Everyone knows he moved everything to his uncle's auto buddy shop out on Route 9. The docks are just a decoy." He delivered this information with the pride of an insider, feeling smart for correcting the clueless detective. He never even realized he'd just given up the location of $1 million in stolen goods. He thought he was just winning a small point in a casual conversation. You can see this principle at work in your own life. Think of a negotiation. Instead of demanding, you have to lower your price. Try the Scharf approach. This is a great product, but I imagine with the current supply chain issues and rising material costs, your profit margin on this must be razor thin already. I don't see how you could possibly take another dollar off. This invites them to correct you. It makes them want to show you where there's flexibility. They might say, "Well, the material costs aren't so bad, but our shipping is what's really killing us." And just like that, you've learned where the soft spot is. You've learned what to negotiate on. You've turned an adversary into a collaborator. When has a softer, more indirect approach gotten you more information than a direct question ever could? Reflect on a time someone got you to open up. Did they ask you a series of probing questions, or did they just create a safe space for you to share? Our minds are not video recorders, but they do have a preferred playback direction, forward. We remember our day from morning to night. We tell stories from beginning to end. This linear, chronological structure is the natural filing system of the brain. It's easy, it's practiced, and for a liar, it's a lifeline. A fabricated story is like a stage play. The liar has rehearsed their lines, their blocking, their entrances and exits, all in the correct order. They have a script. The most effective way to expose the fraudulence of the performance is to throw away the script and ask the actor to perform the third act first, then the first, then the second. This is the essence of the cognitive interview, and its most powerful tool is reverse order recall. When you ask a witness or a suspect to recount events backward, you are doing something profoundly disruptive to their mental process. You are dramatically increasing their cognitive load. Think about it. Try, right now, to tell me what you did yesterday. But start from the moment you went to bed and work your way backward to the moment you woke up. It's difficult, isn't it? You have to concentrate. Your brain has to actively search for and reorder the memories. For a person telling the truth, it's a challenging but achievable task because they are accessing a real, rich, multi-sensory memory. They might struggle with the sequence, but the details are there. The memory is robust. For a liar, this task is often impossible. They are not accessing a memory, they are reciting a script. Their script was not written backward. When you ask them to reverse the order, they can't just rewind the tape. They have to deconstruct their fabricated story and try to rebuild it, piece by piece, in the wrong order, all while under the pressure of your observation. The script shatters. You'll see it in their eyes. The pauses become longer. They'll mix up details. The story becomes thin, stripped of the rich sensory information that accompanies real memories. They might say, "Then I left the house," but they won't be able to recall the feeling of the cold doorknob or the sound of the neighbor's dog barking as they did. I remember a hit-and-run case. We had an eyewitness, a sweet elderly woman named Eleanor. She was terribly shaken, and her initial statement was a jumble of confused facts. She saw the car. She heard a terrible noise. It was all a blur. She swore she didn't get the license plate. She was frustrated with herself, feeling useless. My partner and I sat with her, gave her a cup of tea, and waited for her to calm down. Then, instead of asking what happened, we asked her to start at the end. Tell me about the car after it was gone, speeding down the street. What did the taillights look like? She described them. Okay, now tell me about the moment just before that. The sound. What did it sound like? She described the screech of tires. And right before the screech, slowly, painstakingly, we walked her memory backward, detaching each moment from the trauma of the next. When we finally got to the moment before impact, she closed her eyes and said, clear as day, it was blue, a blue Ford, and the plate started with a J, JZW. By reversing the emotional and narrative momentum, we allowed her brain to access a detail that had been buried by the trauma. This isn't just a trick for exposing liars, it's a powerful tool for enhancing truthful memory. But its effect on a liar is devastating. You can use a simplified version of this in your daily life. If you think your teenager isn't being truthful about where they were, don't ask for a chronological story. Ask them to tell you what happened right before they walked in the door. Then what happened before that? Watch for the hesitation. A real memory is flexible. A lie is brittle. A lie can be told forward, but it almost always breaks when you try to tell it backward. Have you ever tried to recount your day in reverse? How difficult was it to keep the details straight and in the correct, albeit backward order? Think about how this simple change in perspective can reveal the difference between a memory that is recalled and a story that is recited. Words are only half the story. A person can say all the right things, the perfect apology, the most convincing denial, but the truth has a funny way of leaking out. It seeps through the cracks in their carefully chosen words and vibrates in the very sound of their voice. A skilled investigator learns to listen not just to what is being said, but to how it's being said. This is the world of statement analysis and voice stress analysis. It's less about lie detection and more about finding areas of deception, the hot spots in a story that need more pressure. Let's start with the words themselves. Deceptive people have a subconscious urge to distance themselves from their lie. This manifests in their language in predictable ways. One of the biggest red flags is the avoidance of the first-person pronoun, I, instead of saying, I drove to the store, and then I went to the bank. A person being deceptive might say, drove to the store, then went to the bank. The I is missing. It's a small omission, but it's a subconscious attempt to remove themselves from the action. Another tell is the use of the passive voice. A guilty person might say, the gun went off, rather than, I fired the gun. It's an attempt to abdicate responsibility, to make the event something that simply happened, rather than something they did. I recall a case involving a man, let's call him Frank, who reported his wife missing and gave a tearful press conference begging for her return. His words were perfect, filled with emotion and anguish. But when we analyzed the transcript, the red flags were everywhere. He rarely referred to his wife by her name or as my wife. Instead, she became that woman or she. He was creating linguistic distance. When asked what he thought happened, he said, I just hope she's found safe. A truthful, desperate husband would more likely say, I just hope we find her safe. His statement was about a passive outcome, not an active search. The words told us a story of detachment long before the physical evidence proved he was responsible for her disappearance. Then there is the voice itself. Stress, especially the stress of deception, causes involuntary physiological changes. The autonomic nervous system goes into overdrive. The vocal cords tighten or loosen, which produces microtremors in the human voice that are imperceptible to the human ear, but can be picked up by technology like the Computer Voice Stress Analyzer CVSA. But you don't need a fancy machine to pick up on the more obvious cues. The key is to first establish a baseline. Talk to the person about neutral, non-threatening topics, the weather, sports, their job. Listen to the normal rhythm, pitch, and cadence of their voice. That's their baseline. Then when you pivot to the sensitive topic, listen for any deviation. Does their pitch suddenly rise at the end of a sentence? This can indicate a lack of confidence in what they're saying. Do they suddenly start talking much faster or much slower? This change in tempo shows their brain is working overtime. Do they start clearing their throat constantly? This can be a result of the body's fight or flight response, which can dry out the mouth and throat. It's not one single tell that gives it away. It's the change from the baseline. The deviation is where the deception lives. You can practice this anywhere. Listen to a politician giving a speech. They will have their comfortable, rehearsed talking points where their voice is smooth and confident. But listen during the Q&A when they get an unexpected, tough question. You will often hear their vocal pitch rise, their speech rate change, and their use of filler words like a and skyrocket. They are off script, and their voice betrays the cognitive stress. Pay attention during your next meeting at work or a conversation with a friend. Is their voice consistent, or does it change when they discuss certain topics? The voice is a window into a person's emotional and psychological state, and it rarely lies, even when the mouth does. Have you ever heard someone's voice change when they were nervous or being less than truthful? What specific qualities, pitch, speed, volume did you notice shift from their normal way of speaking? Every crime scene is more than just a collection of physical evidence. It's a psychological snapshot. The way a crime is committed, the type of victim chosen, the location, these are not random choices. They are expressions of the offender's personality, fantasies, and motivations. Behavioral profiling, what the FBI calls criminal investigative analysis, is the science of reading that snapshot. It's about reverse engineering the crime to understand the ghost in the machine who committed it. This isn't about psychic intuition, it's a rigorous process of logic, psychology, and statistical probability. It's about recognizing that a person's actions betray their character. We start by distinguishing between the modus operandi (MO) and the signature. The MO is practical. It's what the offender has to do to commit the crime, disabling an alarm, using a certain type of weapon, wearing a mask. The MO can change and evolve as the criminal gets smarter or more experienced. The signature, on the other hand, is psychological. It's what the offender needs to do to fulfill some internal fantasy or emotional need. It's the unnecessary element. For example, if a burglar breaks into a house and steals the electronics, that's the MO. If they also take the time to meticulously arrange all the family photos face down on the floor, that is a signature. It serves no practical purpose for the crime, but it serves a deep psychological purpose for the offender. It's an expression of contempt, of power. The signature doesn't change because the deep-seated need it services doesn't change. And that signature is a direct window into their mind. I worked on a disturbing series of arsons years ago. The fires were always set in affluent neighborhoods, always at night, and always started in the home library or study. The mo was the use of a simple accelerant and timer, but the signature was the location, the library. This told us we weren't looking for a common pyromaniac who just loved to see things burn. This was symbolic. The offender wasn't just destroying a building, they were destroying a symbol of knowledge, success, and wealth. Our profile suggested a suspect who was intelligent and organized but felt cheated, or unrecognized by society, perhaps someone with a high level of education, but a low level of professional success, someone who felt they deserved the life these victims had. This narrowed our focus immensely, away from typical vandals and toward a more specific type of personality. We eventually caught him, a former university lecturer who had been denied tenure and held a deep-seated grudge against what he saw as the intellectual elite. His crimes were his thesis. Layered on top of this is geographic profiling. It operates on a simple, universal principle: laziness. We are all creatures of habit and comfort. Criminals are no different. They tend to commit their crimes within a geographic comfort zone, usually centered around their home, their workplace, or a travel route between the two. By mapping the locations of a series of crimes, analysts can use complex algorithms to identify a buffer zone, the area immediately around the offender's home, where they are unlikely to strike for fear of being recognized, and a hot zone where the probability of their residence is highest. It doesn't give you an address, but it gives you a hunting ground. You can see these principles in your own life. This is simply pattern recognition on a grander scale. Observe the people around you. The co-worker who meticulously organizes their desk but is always late with reports isn't just messy. They might be a perfectionist so afraid of submitting flawed work that they procrastinate. The friend who constantly criticizes others' relationships might not be mean-spirited, but deeply insecure about their own. We all have our daily routines and habits, and we all have signatures, those unique, sometimes quirky behaviors that reveal our deepest anxieties and desires. Learning to read them in others is a skill. Learning to read them in yourself is wisdom. What patterns do you consistently see in the people closest to you? What do those recurring behaviors, the signatures of their personality, truly say about their underlying motivations or fears? We have covered some of the most powerful techniques for getting to the truth. We've talked about evidence, linguistics, and psychology. But all of it, every last bit of it, is useless without one final, critical element: rapport. You can have a mountain of evidence and the most brilliant psychological profile, but if your subject sees you as the enemy, their defenses will be impenetrable. The most sophisticated interrogation technique is not a technique at all, it's the human ability to build a bridge of trust into another person's mind. Once you are on their side of the wall, they will hand you the keys to the castle. This is the most effective and, I must warn you, the most dangerous tool in the entire arsenal. Rapport is not about being nice. It's not about being their friend. It's about making them feel understood. It's about lowering their threat perception to a point where their natural defense is defiance. Denial, aggression simply switch off. One of the most fundamental ways to do this is through a process called mirroring. Subconsciously, we trust people who are like us. A skilled interviewer will subtly mirror a subject's body language. If the subject leans forward, they lean forward. If the subject speaks slowly and deliberately, they slow their own speech to match. This isn't mimicry, it has to be subtle, but it creates a powerful, nonverbal sense of alignment. It sends a primal signal to the other person's brain. This person is on my team. They are part of my tribe. The next layer is validation. This is a concept most people get wrong. Validation is not agreement. You do not have to agree with what the person did. You simply have to acknowledge the emotion or logic from their perspective behind it. I once dealt with a suspect in a brutal assault case who was filled with rage at the system. He was spitting anger at me, at the police, at the world. Instead of arguing with him, I just nodded and said, "It sounds like you feel you've been screwed over at every turn. I can see why you'd be angry. Anyone in your shoes would be." The change was immediate. The anger didn't vanish, but it deflated. For the first time, he wasn't fighting against a wall of judgment. He was being heard. By validating his feeling of injustice, not his actions, I became an ally in his mind, not an accuser. And allies are who we confess to. I remember a cold case, a murder suspect we'll call Hemlock, who hadn't said a meaningful word to a cop in 20 years. He was in his late 60s, a hardened old man. I knew a direct approach was futile. I did my homework and found out he was the star quarterback of his high school football team. Back in the 60s, I walked into that room not with a case file, but with 2 styrofoam cups of coffee and a laminated copy of a newspaper article about the 1968 championship game. I slid it across the table. For the first hour, we didn't talk about the murder. We talked about that game. I let him relive the glory. I mirrored his slow, gravelly way of speaking. I validated his bitterness about how the town had changed. I wasn't a cop, I was just an old guy who appreciated a good story. By the time we finally circled around to the night of the murder, the walls were gone. He spoke not because I cornered him with evidence, but because, for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was talking to another human being who saw him for who he was. These tools are powerful. In a job interview, mirroring the interviewer's energy and finding a common ground can build an instant bond. In a sale, validating a customer's frustrations can earn you their trust and their business. But this comes with a heavy warning. There's a razor-thin line between building rapport for the purpose of understanding and using psychological manipulation for the purpose of control. Using these techniques to exploit people's trust for your own personal gain, to cheat a business partner, to control a romantic partner is a dark path. It may give you short-term victories, but it will leave you with a hollow, transactional life, surrounded by people who are not allies, but victims. The goal is connection and truth, not conquest. Use these skills to build bridges, not to burn them. Think of the most persuasive person you know. Do they win arguments by force, or do they win people over by making them feel seen and heard? What specific things do they do to build that powerful, invisible bridge of rapport?